But ultimately, what we're trying to do is create public pressure, public awareness, media scrutiny, mobilizing organizations, businesses, NGOs, universities to be demanding better, and then to work directly with the industry to change how they invest at scale.
So hello everyone and welcome to Move the Money Interview Series. My name is Ingmar Ensog, CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. This is a series where we invite people, interesting people and companies that are moving the money in the right direction or in the wrong directions. This time we have David Hayman that are working hard on moving the money into the right direction. David, you come from the UK non-profit organization Make My Mother Matter. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, look, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. So like you said, I'm David Hayman. I'm the campaign director at Make My Money Matter. We're a UK-based public campaign which is all about helping raise awareness of the links between our money and climate change, empowering individuals, businesses, NGOs to take more positive steps over how their money is managed and where it goes, and then advocating for change at a systemic level with the finance sector, with pension funds, with banks, with investors. So we change systemically how our money is managed. So we're a campaign, we're about 5 years old. I was the first employee at the campaign back in 2019. So I've had a really fun, challenging, interesting experience helping get the organization off the ground and try and change the culture in the UK around how we think about money and its relationship to the climate emergency. And before that, I've got a background in kind of more international development. I spent 3 years living and working in India before that. And before that, I've been working again across the UK in a variety of different non-profits.
Thank you, David. Make My Money Matter became very famous globally because of a campaign where you have a very famous actor, Olivia Colman, made this very short video that got all over the social media called Olivia Colman. And we have this video here, and let's play it to start with.
Hello, my name is Olivia Colman, and on behalf of the fossil fuel industries, I would like to say a huge thank you for all your support this bumper year. People like you have pumped billions of your hard-earned pounds into our gas and oil businesses. The cash from your pensions has helped us dig, drill and destroy more of the planet than ever before. We've even managed to build a few little wind turbines to keep Greta and her chums happy. Cute. You see, every little drop from your precious nest egg adds up. So while the global temperature may go up a teensy-weensy degree or two, our profits are literally soaring. And that's all thanks to you. So to guarantee us all a warmer, snugglier future, please keep sending your pensions our way. You know the drill. Oh, fracking hell. Okay, start again.
Yes.
Tell me, what's the story behind this video? How did you come up with the idea to create this video, and what have happened since you released it?
Sure. Well, the kind of concept or the challenge was around how can we make the links between our pensions industry and fossil fuel companies more easily understood, more accessible, more interesting and engaging for members of the public. That's been a core part of our campaign since we launched, and something that we are constantly trying to find new, different ways to tell this story and get the message out there. So we worked with a brilliant creative agency called Lucky Generals to sit down and think through what are some of the ways that we can transmit this message and increase awareness. And what we came up with was this concept which uses humor, which makes people feel slightly uncomfortable, which draws on powerful celebrity voices and exposes the fallacy of the fact that our money, without us even realizing it, is often invested in companies which are not only damaging our futures, they're going against our current present day values as well. So all of these ingredients came together, and we drafted a script for the piece where you have as you've seen, a CEO of a big fossil fuel company thanking pension holders for their contributions and enabling them to have a record-breaking, very profitable year. And we think this mixture of dark comedy with creative content with a high-profile celebrity voice helped really transmit and communicate what is quite a complicated or challenging story in a way which was actually quite accessible, fun, and easy to digest for members of the public. And we launched it back in November last year with Olivia Colman, and we had kind of record-breaking views of the content for us. So it was seen over 10 million times organically across social media. It was featured in a variety of UK and national publications. So we had pictures of Olivia Colman, as she was known, in The Telegraph, The Star, The Evening Standard. It was on the TV in the UK as well. We've been featured in New Zealand, in Canada, in the US too. And really, this concept, as you said, I think went quite viral. And what we've seen subsequently from that is a real increase in public awareness of the links between their money and the fossil fuel industry. So we did polling at the start of last year, which looked at how many people realized that their pensions might be invested in fossil fuel companies, and then did it again at the start of this year. And we've seen a significant increase in people who can see those links between their money and climate change. And we've also tracked people who want their pension funds to be investing more sustainably and who plan to switch to a more sustainable pension. And again, significant increases in public demand and expectation for their money to be managed in a more climate-friendly way. So some really positive impacts coming out of it.
What's the reaction from the big banks and the pension players that are not doing the right thing? Have you showed this video for them?
We have, and we've got fairly positive relationships with many people in the pensions industry who understand our role in raising public awareness, and also in supporting many of them who want to change, who want their schemes and their pension funds to be investing more sustainably. I think there was obviously some challenge around it, but I think by and large it was received pretty well within the industry. We shared it with all of the leading providers, gave them a heads up that it was coming. And I think people understood the purpose of the content, they understood the message behind it, and most importantly, they understood that it represented public opinion. This wasn't just us sitting in a room thinking this is a good idea. The majority of people in the UK do not want their pension funds to be supporting fossil fuel expansion, to be going towards new oil and gas facilities. They want their money to be invested in ways which makes profit, sure, but also secures a sustainable, healthy future for them and their families. So I think the industry saw that this was a reflection of growing trends in the UK and around the world for our money to be managed in a much more effective, sustainable, long-term way.
But still, most people, even if they agree with the message in the campaign, have their money in the wrong company, still doing the wrong thing. It's one thing to get a like on social media. It's a total other thing to get someone to really, switch bank and do the action. How do you use the attention from this film to actually make people to switch bank or switch pension provider, etc.?
Sure, and it's a really good point. I mean, we've seen this right from the start, that we found it possible, relatively straightforward to engage the public on this and to raise awareness and generate interest and generate support for what we're doing. But it's much harder to support people to actually move their money, and people are in different situations with that. It may be complicated to move their pensions, they may be locked in, they may not know where their pensions are, it may cost them to move. So there are some challenges around that. So what we set up as a campaign, not actually to be a switching campaign. even though we would support and encourage anyone who wants to find a pension or a bank which is more value aligned to them, we'd absolutely think that's a great outcome, and we provide tools and resources for people to do that. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is create public pressure, public awareness, media scrutiny, mobilizing organizations, businesses, NGOs, universities to be demanding better, and then to work directly with the industry to change how they invest at scale. Because as great as it is, if you move your money and I move my money and someone else moves their money, and it's really important that people should be doing this, I think we also need to be moving the default, the majority, where most people's money is invested and where we think we can have the biggest impact. So we kind of translate that outsider pressure, that awareness, to insider advocacy, and that's where we think we can have real impact and achieve change.
I see, and I understand what you want to achieve, and I think you have been very good at achieving this public awareness and the media pressure, etc. I think that's very needed. But what I see here in Sweden, for example, we have 4 big banks, and one of those big banks, Handelsbanken, is the only one that have a clear policy not lend and invest in fossil fuel companies. And that's fantastic. But I also see that the other 3 banks, they wants to move into that direction, but there's no hurry to do it. They have transition plans and they have all the time in the world to do it, it seems like. Don't you think that the next step is to actually move the money? Because what I see is that as long as it's just a public opinion, a big bank that have big profit from the fossil fuel industry, they will take the damage to have a little bit, public PR, like some brand damage, because the profit will be bigger. So don't you think the next kind of to move this further, we really need to move the money from, in Sweden, we need to move it from 3 banks that are not doing the right thing into the bank that are doing the right thing. Because what I see is not that this bank that are fossil free is growing more than the others. They're not taking market share because of the decision. And if a bank doesn't take market share, there will be some green banks, but they will not move the business. Do you agree with this reasoning? And if you agree with it, what do you think is needed to get enough people to move the money so that we get a market stress? Because we don't need to get everyone move the money. If we just get some core people to move the money, it will banks will go green very quickly because they don't want to lose customers, right?
Yeah, so I agree with lots of that, and I think we would definitely encourage people to move their money if they want to, both for them as individuals to make sure that their banks or pensions are aligned to their values or their principles, and also, as you said, because it can be an effective tool to put pressure on banks to change their policy and to create that market demand. And I think the build I'd have on that is something that we've seen and that we are focusing slightly more on in the UK, is, as well as individuals moving their bank or considering their banking choices, is to get high profile organizations, charities, businesses, universities to take action on their company banks, because they are by definition significantly larger than the individuals. They have more money, they are bigger clients, and they can exert more pressure. And so a couple of interesting things that we've seen and worked on in the UK, 2 high-profile non-profits, Oxfam and Christian Aid, have both left Barclays because of Barclays' fossil fuel policies, because Barclays is Europe's biggest fossil fuel funder. That's having pressure and creating that media spotlight and encouraging individuals to think. Another really interesting piece of work that we've been supporting on has been the University of Cambridge has pulled together 25 different of the biggest universities in the UK who have all signed up to an RFP, a request for proposal, for cleaner, greener banking options, because they're not happy with their provider, the majority of whom are with Barclays because of its fossil fuel funding. Those 25 universities cover about £5 billion in assets under management. And I think that really starts to get the banks to sit up and notice, because just the volume, the pressure, the size, and again the spotlight that the momentum this creates can have real impact. So yes, individuals, but also yes, all organizations should be thinking about this too.
So is this strategy because you see that it's easier to get big institutions like universities to take all the hassle to actually move the money instead of having just focusing on individuals? Is that the reason why you do it, or do you see that it's better to get the big institutions to move the money and focus on that because you see it more efficient?
Yeah, I'd say more efficient rather than easier. So it's still a challenge, obviously, but you've got organizations who have got sustainability plans, who've got climate commitments, but the majority of whom do not consider their banks or their pensions as part of that agenda. We did some research which found 95% of the FTSE 100, the biggest companies in the UK, have got a sustainability plan. Just 5% of them mention pensions within it. So we think there's this or banks, so there's this big contradiction right now. Organizations talking about sustainability, making big changes, but they haven't tapped into their financial choices as a mechanism for impact. And so we think there's an opportunity to tell that story and get them to take action. And then in terms of putting pressure on the industry, we think that's a really effective route to put pressure for the reasons I outlined before, which is the size, the scale, the amount of money they have, the profile they have. Again, I think 10,000 people leaving Barclays will have an impact. I think 100 big businesses or NGOs leaving Barclays will have an even bigger impact. And again, we should be doing all of this. All of it is contributory, is beneficial, is important. But I do think the size and scale of organizations can drive change slightly more efficiently. And also, I think back to what we talked about at the start, getting individuals who are time poor, who have got other things on their mind, other priorities, who are concerned about their finances, who may have heard about the campaign and recognize it's important, but feel it's a risky decision to move their money or change bank, or may not know who is the green option or the clean option. That can just take time. And again, we invest in that. We think that's important, but you're driving big cultural and behavioral change with individuals, as I'm sure you know, is a challenge, and it takes time, money, investment, repeated information, and sometimes we have to shortcut that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's quite smart that you focus on the big accounts and have them to move. And there is actually an initiative out there that is very mission aligned, that is initiated by the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. Johan Rockström is one of the co-chairs. It's called the Green Cash Guide. Have you heard about this initiative?
I've heard about the Roadmap Initiative, and not necessarily the Green Cash Guide specifically.
I think it's something you definitely should look into. We will have a link to this guide here in the video, and I will send it to you also. It's actually a methodology to focus on businesses, to measure their financial carbon footprint. So many businesses, especially in service sector, that don't have big industries that pollute, their biggest emission is actually from their bank cash savings. And if you measure that, you probably have, it's so easy to cut that emission in half by just talk to your bank, have them to change the bank. So this is a new methodology, and it's a guide to help all those net zero companies that have the targets. If they are going to succeed with their targets, many times the easiest thing to do is to talk with your bank and have a dialogue with them to change. And as you know, it's many multinational, big corporations like Apple, like Microsoft, they all have those net zero targets, and they have a lot of cash. So that's a potential to take the whole campaign of moving money further. So please check out that guide. I think it could be very helpful, and it's also a way to measure if you switch bank, what will you gain from it? You will cut your emission in half. That's maybe much easier than stop flying. You could reduce flying, of course, but what you can do here and now with a little effort is what you should focus on to do immediately.
Exactly, and that's. I mean, it sounds like I don't know if you've come across the carbon bankroll report out of the States, which looks at the 10 largest, I think, companies in the US and does exactly this, compares their operational emissions with their financed emissions. And as you say, they're exponentially higher through their choice of bank rather than through their operations. It's a great report, the carbon bankroll report. And I think the second point to say, which you were just alluding to, is it's actually a relatively cost-effective, cheap, easy, straightforward thing for lots of organizations to do. Not to say that you can just click your fingers and move bank overnight, and there are some complications, and you want to make sure you find a provider who gives you the right services and what you need. But there are options out there. You were talking about the options in Sweden. There are options being developed in the UK, all around the world, which are much cleaner and greener, and you don't have to have a cost associated with it. It can be relatively straightforward. When you compare it to some of the other emissions cutting activities you might need to take, it can be one of the more straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. I interviewed on a previous episode of those dialogue, I interviewed the largest pension asset manager in Sweden, the AP7. It's like the state-owned pension fund for 5 million Swedish citizens. So half of the Swedish population are saving their money in this fund. It's kind of the default choice. So you need to choose something else actively, otherwise you will get stuck with this. They have great financial return, but if you look into their investment portfolio, one example is that AP7 is, I think it's number 12 largest investor in Saudi Aramco oil, for one example. So they are heavy oil investors. And I don't agree with that, of course, but it's interesting to hear their reasoning, etc. And I mean, it's two things. They are saying like, yeah, but we are active ownership, etc. And I think between us and the viewers here, we know that you can't be an active owner in Saudi Aramco oil. It's 98% controlled by the Saudi Arabia state, and they don't want to phase out fossil fuel. They resisted that heavily for the climate meeting, etc. So that's not a valid argument. We all know that. But they had another argument that is harder to argue about. And that is, if they sell their position, someone else will buy it. And that's also what we have seen, where a lot of European banks are starting to divest. And I just read a new report about American banks picking that business up. How do you see, like I mean, if someone else are buying it, how will this affect? How will this change things? Can we really change the oil companies by divesting when someone else are picking the investment up? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're the two challenges which are flagged. I'd agree with your analysis on their ability to influence someone like Saudi Aramco. I think even some of the private companies, lots of the pension fund managers in the UK will say that they are trying to influence and challenge Shell or BP or some of these companies. But you just need to look at the fact that both Shell and BP are rolling back on their targets despite this supposed pressure and advocacy, to show that actually how effective is your ability as a pension fund manager to influence them. And you've got to question that. Not to say it's impossible to have any influence or there's no influence to be had, but I think the evidence suggests that influence is minimal. These companies are expanding, not reducing. And so I think that's
otherwise we will not be here with the situation. I mean, it's not working. The strategy is not working.
It's not working. I think having said that, the flip side is then, does divestment work? And I think it's not. I think on a case by case basis, you get to the argument, which is, well, someone else is going to come in, buy the money, and what difference does it make? But I think the more we can do this at scale, the more we can do this collaboratively between and across fund managers, the more we can do this over a prolonged period of time, I think the more potential for impact that is. I think individual divestment here and there in kind of bespoke small chunks is not going to have the real material impact on those companies. But I think consistent, coordinated, substantive action from multiple leading pension funds can do. And what you start to get is a place where there are fewer and fewer options for those companies to get money. Not that they can't get any money anywhere, but there are fewer options. The price of that capital may go up. The social license for those companies to operate will go down because you're getting people dropping them and this is going away. So I think it's not a perfect answer, but I think it's a part of a journey and part of a progress towards a better situation. But it's not easy. It's really not easy.
I had Jakob Koenig from Fair Finance Guide in a previous episode. And we talked about this, and he had a good way of putting it, and that is when big institutions that have high influence in society, like big banks and also universities and those players, when they are not investing in fossil fuel anymore, they will stop defend fossil fuel. Because what you're not invested in, you have no reason to take in consideration. So I think that's a big reason why it's important to get accredited institutions to move away from fossil fuel. They will not defend them anymore. Because if they are invested in big fossil fuel, they always, of course they want to transition away from fossil fuel, but they will always try to buy some extra time because they have position in it. So I think that is in line with your reason in the social license. But I have another argument that that I'm personally or very much trying to push out there, and that is we don't have time. The way we approach this, we launched this Move the Money campaign, where this interview series is a part of, and it's a campaign that is not only about talking and creating, awareness about this. We literally help people to move the money. We give them a guide on how to do it. If you're a corporation, how do you know which banks and asset managers that have high investment in fossil fuel, and where can you move it to? How are you doing it in concrete steps? This is very tricky because we try to do this on a global level. So, but we want everyone to take after it. But our main argument why it's so important to move the money is not so much about, divest from fossil fuel. It's more that the money is needed into the solutions. The EIA has calculated that we need investment of $4.5 trillion in solutions yearly. Pension asset manager, they are today investing $3 trillion in fossil fuel. Okay, we have the money there, let's move it there. And even if it comes, some bad boys buying those fossil fuel shares, doesn't matter because they will not buy the solution. So we need to move the money to the solution. That is another argument. It's kind of irrelevant if fossil fuel will change because we don't need them. We need to create a society where money goes into the solutions. So that's how we try to it's not all about where the money are, move away from. It's also about where to move them to. And this is an argument I see many individuals are getting much more excited to. How can they make more money for their pension, etc.? It's not in oil. You and me know that.
Right. No,
Uh, so
exactly.
yeah.
No, and we did.
So final question for you. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think we two things really quickly. One, we did a really interesting report with the Phoenix Group, it's a large asset manager and insurer in the UK, which found that there's the UK pensions industry on its own could invest over $1 trillion into climate solutions over the next 15 years, were they to increase ambition and
Yeah.
action and the policy environment change. So there's a huge opportunity there, like you said. And I think the last argument, or maybe one of the last arguments in favour, is just to consider, as much as we often think about the macro change we want to see, I think it's important to think about an individual who may simply just not want their pension fund, their pension, their money,
Yeah.
and their profits to be going to these companies. And those individuals have to have that choice, have to have that option to say, you know what, even if someone else is going to buy it, I just don't feel comfortable knowing my money's going to these companies who are flagrantly ignoring the science and developing new oil and gas. And I don't want to profit from that. I don't want to support that. I don't want to enable that. And that's a really individual, personal choice, which again kind of gets lost in the big macroeconomic conversations around this.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's to add something there. For me personally, the way I dislike big oil is not that they are transition too slow or not transition at all. I mean, of course, that's very problematic. But it's that they are sponsoring. They're working against us.
Yeah.
They're investing in fossil fuel lobbying, and they are releasing movies about climate denialists. They try to discredit science and try to fool people. So I don't want to give my money to an industry that are working against me and my children and everyone else. So if we defund the fossil fuel industry, they will not have money to work against the green transition, and that's all. There's so many arguments here. I mean, it's a no-brainer, and I do think that we don't have so many viewers that don't agree that we have the truth on our side. But it's not about what's right to do; it's about how to mobilize enough people doing this. And I would like to give a big I'm at lab to Make My Money Matter, because you are really have broken, you have broken out from this bubble and reach a lot of more people to understand this with your campaigns, etc. So my last question to you: where do you take this next? Do you have new following up campaigns? How are you going to level up further?
Yeah, well, I think the three big issues we're working on this year are fossil fuels, as we've been talking about. So trying to get less of our money going towards the fossil fuel companies who are expanding. And as we were just touching on, more going towards renewables, climate solutions, nature positive investments, painting a more positive story about what our money can do. And third is a big area both for public demand and also climate change, is addressing the role of our money in deforestation. That's something we've been working on for the last couple of years. And again, we've got plans to do some creative content around that to help tell the story, raise public awareness and drive action, because we think that's a really critical area, but isn't getting as much focus right now and really needs to be. So I think there are big areas.
Are you optimistic that we're going to solve the climate crisis?
It's a big question. I'm optimistic about lots of brilliant stuff which is happening, and feel there's a lot of incredible campaigns, innovation, creativity, investment, action all over the world. And that really excites me and makes me optimistic. The thing which I struggle with and scares me is the time horizon. I think if we had an extra 20 years to be tackling these problems, I'd feel pretty confident that we could turn it around, and lots of brilliant stuff would help us out. I think given we're in such a tight timeline, that's what makes me less confident. So I think there's the solutions out there. I think there's the energy out there. I think there's a lot of will, and there's increasingly money too for this. It's just we need to do it 10 times quicker.
That's why I found that we don't have time. So I agree with you, but it's very dark, as we know. But if we don't believe that we can do this, what's the point? So of course we can do this, and even if we can't fix everything, we will lose things. But I do believe that we can turn things around, and the reason why I believe it is because people like you. So thanks for joining this program, and keep up your good work. And if you want to check out my Make My Money Matter, you have the web address below here. So go to their website and check out what they do. And lastly, I happen to know, because I'm a little bit involved, that there's going to be a Swedish version of this Olivia Coal Mine film.
Yes.
About what's happening here with like 5 million Swedish people are saving or are big funders of oil. Do you have any advice to the Swedish group that are doing this Swedish Olivia Coal Mine film on how they can do it and succeed as you have done?
Well, from what I understand, there's some brilliant people behind it in terms of the directors, the talent, the organization bringing it to life. So I think there's a fantastic team working on it. I'm really excited to see it. I think my advice and something we took when we were making our version was to be quite bold, be quite in your face, be quite punchy with it, and not try and kind of hold back, to really embrace it and to make it fun, challenging, say the things that you may be slightly nervous about saying, but you think need to be said. I just really wouldn't hold back on this, because it's very important. And I think the public resonate with that kind of level of honesty and directness too.
Okay, I will forward it to the team working on it.
Brilliant.
And for every viewer that wants to be on the wait list when this is going to be released, we have the web address down here, so to go and visit Fund My Mother. That is very inspired by Make My Money Matter. So thanks so much for joining us, David. And
thank you for having
the viewers, please go to wedonhatime.org/move the money, and you can get involved on how to move the money. And find a lot of resources. And we have just also launched a new functionality on We Don't Have Time. So when you look up a bank on We Don't Have Time, you now see how much money they invest in fossil fuel. So go and search for your bank and you will see the numbers yourself. Many times it's scary numbers. Sometimes it's not so big numbers. So hopefully you have saved your savings in the right institution. Otherwise, you know what to do. Move the money. Thank you so much.
Thank you.